Welcome to Mentality Meets, part of the Mindshift Forum for 2022. Conversations that explore mental health stories and strategies to help leaders like you change the culture of mental health in your workplace. I'm Peter Larkham, mental health instructor and expert, and your host for today. This year, our theme is hope. What is it? What does it look like? Where do we go to find it? So today, I'm going to be talking with Lucy Nichol. She is a former columnist with Sarah Millican Standard Issue magazine, whose work has also appeared in The Independent, The iPaper, NME, Red Magazine, Metro, and many, many more. So today's session is all about anxiety. We'll be talking about what a panic attack feels like. What are the turning points? And as always, finishing off with words of hope for anyone currently suffering and words of hope for those who are supporters. If you'd like to join the Mindshift Forum 2022, please sign up and take the Hope Assessment at www.peterlarkham.com and find the Mindshift Forum tab. For all those watching on YouTube, please like this video, leave a comment, hit subscribe and get the latest content to help you with your mental health journey. Anyway, let's not wait any longer. Here's my conversation with Lucy Nichol.
I suppose my journey in terms of mental health and understanding what was happening with my own brain goes back to when I was really quite young. So I've lived with an anxiety disorder for many, many, many years. I'd probably even say it started when I was about 8 or 9. I had no idea, but I was waking up in the middle of the night and feeling sick and shaking. But I had this feeling of dread, and my mum used to have to sit with me. And then when I turned 15, I always describe as the mother of all panic attacks. It literally brought me to my knees on a public street. So I do have a lot of experience of anxiety, unfortunately. And I've kind of been in a journey of ups and downs. And, I feel that today I've learned quite a lot about it. I manage it quite well, but I do still have times when it overwhelms me. And in terms of why I'm talking to you, I'm really passionate about tackling mental health stigma. I think because I work in the media so much, I've worked in PR and with the media for years and years, God, probably like 20 years now. So the media really interests me, and that's why I think stigma is really important to me, because I've experienced stigma and I've experienced discrimination, and knowing the role that media plays in that, and also how we can play a role in challenging that by getting really good, accurate, authentic messages out into the media is it means a lot to me. So I'm here to tackle stigma and hopefully give hope.
In the conversation around anxiety and what is anxiety, I mean, you just said you had the mother of all panic attacks. And the way I describe panic attacks in the context of training is that it's very similar to that of a heart attack or an asthma attack. It's incredibly fearful. There's a lot of fear that comes with a panic attack. And can you just talk us through the impact of a panic attack in your experience for anyone who has never actually experienced a panic attack? Because although I teach and train about it, I've never actually had a panic attack for myself. So I'm only ever talking from the knowledge of, not the experience of. So can you just take us through a little bit of the physical feelings, you go for it. I have no idea how to do this, so you go for it.
Yeah, so I would say a panic attack, for me anyway, they can come on just like that, instantly. It's not that you're sitting there worrying about something and it builds up into something else. It can just happen. It can be triggered by something that's worrying you. So my first panic attack was back in the 90s. I'd just gone on the pill, and there was a pill scare in the media. So, about blood clots and all these awful things that the pill could cause. And I had seen a little mark on my arm, which is not the sign of a blood clot at all. And I think that just goes to show how irrational your brain can be. And literally the moment I saw it, it must have been a split second. This whole narrative had gone through my mind, and I was convinced I had deep vein thrombosis. And it's like a wave that comes over you. That's the only way I can describe it. It's like I think you feel it physically, because it feels, certainly for me, it makes me feel very faint, confused. My heart would pound, my breathing will be very quick. Sometimes makes me feel very sick. Sometimes upsets my stomach. I'll not go into detail, but it does. It's just incredibly overwhelming. And I think other things as well you can experience. It can make you sweat as well. So it's very physical, and the psychological side of it is just a very, very intense fear. And it's sometimes hard to even describe where that fear is coming from. I've woken up in the middle of the night before with a panic attack, and that's gone from being fast asleep and having had a nice day and a nice evening with some friends. And, I woke up and I felt thirsty, and all of a sudden it became a huge panic attack. That was the last major panic attack I had, actually. So I think that it is this unbelievable feeling of fear, but it's really hard to rationalize that fear, which is why it's hard to come out of it. Panic attack, it's not worrying. It's not just worrying about something. It's a very, very overwhelming physical and psychological experience that is a horrible thing to go through. It really is.
I mean, that's really, really helpful. Thank you. And really interesting, because I suppose kind of the way I would, again, try and explain it, and please tell me if this is wrong, is that when I'm delivering training about it, I often explain to people, think of a time in your life when you were really ill, so ill that you couldn't get out of bed, except to get to the toilet if you managed to do that in time, but you were that ill. And now that you're not ill, and you look back at that time, what goes through my head is, was I really that ill? Like, seriously, because was I simply just kind of hamming it up just a little bit because I didn't want to get out of bed? I mean, pain, if you've ever experienced like a really acute pain and then you don't have that pain anymore, it's like, was it really that bad? And there's something in our minds that can understand that, is that at the time, it was absolute 100% reality. But now that I look back on it, there's this disconnect. I can't quite rationalise that it was that extreme or that bad. Is that a good way of trying to help people understand it?
Yeah, because I think especially because I write a lot about mental health, and I'm part of the sort of the online mental health community, I get imposter syndrome about, I'll tell you a funny story about that once. I was reading a book about anxiety. So it was kind of part memoir, part sort of how to deal with it. And I tweeted something about that I'm reading this book, and now I feel like I'm just an imposter because I feel like maybe their experiences were worse than mine. And somebody replied and said, "Oh my God, I've just got a book. I've just had a book come out, and I feel like an imposter." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's funny because it's your book I'm reading." And it just goes to show that people with anxiety. Yeah, it was technically Ron Aaron Gillies. It was his book, and so it just goes to show that we all have that kind of, am I making it up? Am I exaggerating it? Was it really that bad? And the only thing I can say is that the only way to kind of remind yourself of how bad it was is for when it happens again. And when it happens again in that moment, and you just feel like you're afflicted with this horrible, horrible thing that keeps happening to you every so often. You think, I'd rather be an imposter. I would rather be an imposter who was exaggerating than deal with this. So I think it's quite a common thing. I think it's especially something people with anxiety probably think about a lot. You know, was it really all that bad? And then when it comes back and hits you again, you're reminded that, yeah, it is. Panic attacks are they're indescribable in some ways. Because I think that's the other thing, is that people think, well, it's a panic attack. Surely it's like mind over matter. You can just, because nothing bad is going to happen to you. But it's not something that, like I say, you don't sit and rationalize it and think, oh, there's no need for me to have a panic attack right now, because actually I'm in a safe space. I'm not in danger. So I don't need to. It doesn't work like that. It just gets you. And so it's already taken you psychologically and physically to an extreme place where you might be, hyperventilating and palpitations and sweating and what have you. So even when your mind catches up with the rational side, and you can start to realize, actually, I don't have a deep vein thrombosis, or, this isn't going to happen to me or whatever. It still takes a moment then for your body to come back down from that sort of intense anxiety, because, you've just got this adrenaline rushing through you. So, yeah, it's they're interesting. They're not fun, but I think you do. I really do think it's, and I don't know whether it's a way of coping with it as well, as in terms of minimizing it somehow, but that does get mixed up with more negative feelings of feeling like an imposter, of someone who's, was I just exaggerating? So, yeah, it's an interesting experience.
We're talking about a life journey for you. So you're saying kind of from the age of 8, kind of knowing that this process was going on, whether it had been given the label or the diagnosis, kind of not so, but then 15, kind of having this panic attack that you just explained, right through to you now. And I suppose kind of what I'm fishing for and wanting to ask in the context of this is, when talking about recovery for mental health illnesses, I often talk about more good days than bad, because it's not necessarily about diagnosis free, and sometimes not even symptom free, but it's about being able to live in a having more good days than bad context. And I suppose kind of what that brings me to in the conversation about you and your life and your journey is, have there been pockets or years, and I think of pockets as kind of being days/weeks, and then kind of the context of years, and how do you see the conversation of recovery for you in your life? Because this is something that has been an ongoing journey for you over the period of years. So what does recovery look like for you?
And first of all, can I just apologise for this cat? He always joins me on Zoom calls. So for me, I think, first of all, it took, there he is, it took quite some time. I think I was having CBT when I was about 19, 20, so back in the 90s, late 90s. And I think that certainly after I didn't take any medication then, and certainly after that, it was just, the NHS 6 sessions, I felt better equipped to manage, definitely. And I wasn't living with such acute, intense, because prior to that, the reason I went to the doctor was because I had a week where it was like a week-long panic attack, which was, I was waking up with it, which was quite frightening. So I felt better able to manage it, but my life was still blighted by it. And I saw different therapists over the years and had learned lots of different skills and techniques, I think CBT was really helpful. And then gradually, I think as I got into my late 20s, it started to, the periods of feeling very anxious had really decreased quite dramatically then. So it was never like a constant, but it was just, it was there fairly often. So it became really frustrating. But then, yeah, I just felt like the more I was learning about it, the better equipped I felt to manage it. And one thing that one therapist taught me, which I think has been really, really helpful. Well, in fact, there's two things that I've been taught about in recovery, which I found really, really helpful. First one was a therapist describing me. She said to me when I was describing what I was going through, she said, oh, it does sound exhausting. She said, have you ever watched Meerkat Manor? Because you remind me of a meerkat because you're always on the lookout for danger. And there was something interesting in her sort of helping me to visualize my anxiety as something that was trying to help me, even though, anxiety is pain in the, it's horrible. You don't want it. But it actually decreased the intensity of it. And it actually helped me with self-compassion to think of it like that, to think of it as it's just my brain going into overdrive trying to protect me. Maybe I shouldn't get so angry, because the more angry I was getting with it, the worse the anxiety would be. So that was one of the things I found helpful. Another therapist, God, I've had a few over the years, another therapist said to me when I was really worried that I was having a relapse, and she said, no, you're not. You're having a lapse because you've come so far on your journey. Just because you're experiencing symptoms of anxiety again, it doesn't mean you're going to go back to where you were when you were 19, 20, and it was quite intense and very significant, very overwhelming. She said, you've learned so much, and you don't need to look at this as a relapse. You're in a completely different place. And you'll probably find that these symptoms aren't as intense and don't last as long. And I did find that. So I found that the more I learned, the better able I was to manage it. Oh, and then another therapist said to me, and this is interesting around managing your expectations, I think, is that he said to me, you're probably never going to cure anxiety. You'll probably always be vulnerable to periods of anxiety. And if you can sort of accept that, it kind of makes life easier. And I think those three things together, actually, I think they're all about being a bit easier on yourself and not trying for an all or nothing, I'm never going to experience a panic attack again. I'm just so grateful now that I haven't had one for quite some time. I've had intense periods of anxiety, particularly health anxiety, as you can imagine, recently that have been quite overwhelming. But I'd say that's relative. I'd say as somebody who lives with an anxiety disorder, to have experienced intense periods of anxiety during a pandemic, well, I'm not going to kick myself for that, because everybody's been experiencing anxiety. Although mine was certainly irrational, the kind of health anxieties I had at the start of the pandemic were about everything except for COVID. So, yeah, I just think that the more we learn, the more we experience, the more we talk about it, the better equipped we are. And so the balance shifts massively. It isn't a huge part of my life anymore, hasn't been for a while. I may well experience a panic attack tomorrow. I mean, I don't know. But even if I do, I know that doesn't mean I'm going to spend the next 12 months living under that cloud of anxiety every day. I know I'm going to get through it. And I think the other thing I have to say as well, and obviously stressing that this is absolutely not suitable for everyone, but I have found a lot of relief through medication. So I've been taking antidepressants for my anxiety for about 6 years. And I know that that's a very personal thing and it doesn't suit everybody, but it has really helped me. And I think that has been a huge part of my recovery, because I started taking them at a time when I was really, really struggling with panic attacks returning. It just helped. It didn't get rid of them, but it seemed to give me an extra few seconds to try to rationalize and put into practice the things I learned. It's a really holistic approach that you need. It's never one thing. There's never one quick fix. And I think as long as you accept that you need to put a bit of work in, that recovery is there. And, you know, as hopeless and frightened as it might seem when you're living in the middle of anxiety, you know, I certainly felt hopeless. I felt hopeless and thought, you know, I'm always going to be like this. And it's just really not the case. It really isn't. And, you know, I think just the more we learn, the more we talk, the more support we get, the better equipped we are to manage any episodes going forward. So
that's incredible, Lucy. It just so insightful, because there are so many different things that you have engaged with to help you through your journey. And I think kind of what I'm hearing through you talking is that actually we need to just cut people some slack sometimes. There can be so many expectations put on people of what recovery looks like, or what it should be, or how you should kind of improve, or whatever it is. And actually, like you say, it's a completely independent journey. And to be able to get alongside someone and just give them that hope that there is better days ahead. And it doesn't mean that means you're never going to get it again, but at least you now know that it's not going to be the end of you, and it's not going to kind of completely consume you. And like you said, it's not a complete relapse either. It's an event that has an impact, but it's not the end story. And I think that's what I want to really grab hold of is the context that anxiety is a very real part of a lot of people's lives, but it's not the end story. It's not that, what I'm hearing, and because so much of what I want Mentality Meets to be is about how we can utilize the information we're getting to encourage one another and to encourage the people that we're supporting. And even in the context of, I don't even know the right language, having anxiety, struggling with anxiety, whatever the right wording is in the context of this, even if it is a part of your life for the entirety of your life, it still doesn't have to govern you. Is that the truth?
Yeah. I think what happens is, I think particularly with anxiety, that you can get caught in this vicious cycle of, you know, because panic attacks are so awful, and especially when they happen in places, and then those places they start to trigger you. You know, people who might experience them at work. There were certain meetings that I would go in that I would, you know, because I experienced a bit of panic in one of those meetings before, then every time that I was in one of those full staff meetings, I would, and so you can get lost in this cycle that feels like it's never going to end. And I think sometimes, so yeah, you're fearing, it's not just about having the panic attack, it's about fearing the next panic attack. And so you're caught up in this. And I think, you know, I'll be completely honest that sometimes when that's happened to me, that has kind of pulled me down and really, you know, hit a bit of a anxiety rock bottom, if you like. And that's when I've had to go, right, I need help, because this is, you feel like everything's a bit out of control and that you're stuck in this. And it's, you just need one thing, I think, to break that cycle. And I remember the last time I felt like that, which was probably around 2015, because these panic attacks were coming from seemingly nowhere. And my husband said to me, you've got to go and see the doctor. You need to get some help for this. And I went, and just taking that first step broke that cycle. And I started to feel more hopeful. And I started to give it more perspective instead of feeling completely lost and tangled up in this awful thing of anxiety. I felt like I was gradually climbing out of it. So I think that's the thing, that when you feel like you're completely lost in it and it's really overwhelming and taking over your life, it's not about thinking, I have to stop this and get out of this now. It's about I have to take that first step. And you don't have to take that first step alone. It's not up to you to, click your fingers, say, I'm going to get better and just snap yourself out of it. It doesn't work. But just opening up to somebody, or just seeing your GP, or just, starting therapy, or just doing one thing that helps you to see a bit of light and a bit of hope will set you off on the right track, even if it takes weeks or months to really get past it. I think that's the thing you need to do, is break that cycle.
Mental ill health costs UK employers around £1,700 per team member each year. That's a staggering £45 billion every year. Despite a general awareness that mental health is more of a problem than ever, most people have no idea what to do. This is where we can help. Mentality is a 1-hour video course equipping your staff to spot the signs of poor mental health and take action. Invest in your people, from the cleaner to the CEO, because every person, whoever they are, can be affected.
I mean, anxiety in itself is normal, natural, useful, helpful, healthy, and all those kind of words that come along. And I do want to try and take a moment and just bring in the context of where the world is at the moment, because there's a lot of anxiety that is kicking around. And I have a son who's 9 years old who is picking up on little bits, and we're not showing him the news, we're not showing him kind of the images of what's going on around the world, but we were talking to him the other day and said, what is it you want to know? And his first thing was, it's not going to come here, is it? And it was is that a statement or is that a question? And for a 9-year-old, if we pick up on the anxious context, is that there is this thing going on over there that could encroach in on my world. And what I've been fascinated with is that I have been more interested in the news than ever before in my life. I've wanted to just kind of catch up and hear and understand what the developments are, because this is the first real context for me of a kind of war context and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to ask, in the context of people who are experiencing anxiety or other mental health issues, and they hear this news and the catastrophizing process that I want to say comes more naturally because of the acute anxiety history. And again, I don't know if I'm using the right language here, Lucy, but for you as someone who has a history of anxiety, and you experience kind of not only kind of the lockdown and pandemic and all of that stuff, but then we suddenly come out of that, as it were, on the 25th of February and go, hooray, everything's coming back to normal a little bit. And then this news hits almost the next day. It's that kind of feeling that there's one thing and then another and then another and then another. And how does it impact on you and how you view things, if I can ask that as a very kind of deliberately specific question to you?
So I think that everybody's different, and I think certainly children, their response will be very, very different, because they have a childlike response to it, which is, can be very frightening for them when they hear what's happening. I think as adults, so yes, I've catastrophized about it in my head and I've worried, but I think the thing that helps me the most is gratitude, really, because, I actually wrote a piece the other day, which was me kind of trying to get my head around what was happening and how people over here, for example, were feeling about it. And I looked at the picture of the traffic jam. There was that famous picture of the traffic jam in Ukraine. And I just tried to imagine being in one of those cars stuck. And I was sitting in my bedroom with a cat. And all I could hear outside was distant traffic humming and birds singing. And I just thought, geez, I'm so lucky. I am so lucky, because those people sitting in those cars are in a very, very different. They're experiencing something I can't even begin to imagine. So I think gratitude and trying to put because in some ways I think putting yourself, or trying to have empathy for people who are out in Ukraine and, fearing for their lives, it just totally changes your perception, I think. And I'm not saying that because people with anxiety disorders, there may be something incredibly triggering about what's happening. And they may, we can create these obsessions and they're very frightening, even if we are relatively safe. And I think that's the point of an anxiety disorder, is that it can be completely irrational. So I think on the one hand, it's if somebody is really struggling, if they're living in what we see as relative safety, but they're really struggling, I think we have to be careful not to criticize, because it may feel very, very real and very, very frightening. And I don't think that's somebody trying, somebody being selfish or unsympathetic. I think that is, if somebody has an anxiety disorder, it can really feel like that. But for me, I think the reason I'm not having massive panic attacks or anything about what is happening is because I've tried really hard to think about the people who are there, who are fleeing. And like I say, it's just absolutely unimaginable. So gratitude to me, I think I just think practicing gratitude in every area of life. And I think that it's really important, somebody who's suffered panic attacks, and we talk about that, when you look back on it, sometimes I've sat in my bed reading a book and drinking a cup of herbal tea, and everything's felt so peaceful. And I'm just so grateful that I can have those moments of peace and of calm. And when you've experienced panic attacks, and you think back to those really intense periods, you think, God, I'm lucky. I know what it's like to feel like that, but I've got past it. Now, that's obviously about panic attacks, but I think when it comes to something as horrifying as what is happening in Ukraine, I think I just need to remember how lucky I am and how safe I am. But as I say, I think it's very, very different for children.
I mean, coming back to that context of hope and what you just said about the gratitude, so often I think we forget to be thankful for what we have. There is something in our humanity, in our current drive, that we constantly look for the next thing, the next kind of buzz, the next whatever it is. It's a little bit like a magpie. You're looking for that kind of sparkly things all over the place. And we forget to just take a moment and just be thankful for what we do have. And I suppose kind of what I want to encourage in the context of anyone who is listening or watching this is just to take a moment and think about what you are thankful for. Just the little things like hot running water. We with the storm the other week had a power cut. And as soon as we had a power cut, we said to the kids, "Oh, we've had a power cut. Right, what should we do?" And our immediate thought was, "Oh, let's do some baking." Oh, we don't have a cooker. It's like, and we couldn't even think of an activity that didn't include electricity. And we suddenly kind of just got our kids together and said, "Oh, okay, let's think about electricity. What are we thankful for that electricity gives us?" And we just kind of listed off a whole heap of stuff because, like, their tablets. It was mainly screen time that my kids were most like, "Oh, we're never going to have screen time again." But just this feeling of actually, let's be really grateful for the things that we do have. My last question for you is, where, in the context of your journey over the years that you've experienced this and journeyed through it, can you tangibly see, understand, experience, verbalize where the tipping point was towards recovery? You gave the example earlier of your husband saying, you need to go to the doctor. And just the act of doing that began to kind of pull you out of it. And so I'm just wondering, is there anything that you could kind of tap into and say, right, this is what hope looks like. This is what it feels like. This is kind of my tangible experience of the turning point. For somebody who's experiencing mental health illnesses or who is in a situation where they're looking for hope, what is it that they're looking for? That's a really awkward question right there. So yeah, over to you then, Lucy.
So one thing I think with anxiety is that it's very insular. You're very much, getting lost in your own head, and, especially with health anxiety as well, getting lost in every sort of feeling within physically as well, your heartbeat or your mouth being dry or whatever. And so I think there's something about what brings you out of that. And I know this is going to sound really corny, but I will never forget one day when I was in the middle of panic, and I was before they built the houses behind us, I was just washing my hands in the bathroom, and I had the window open and I could see the trees, and it just reminded me of how small I am in the bigger picture of things, and it made me feel more powerful. It sounds bizarre. It made me feel like, I think because it made me feel I was part of something much bigger, and it almost took me not out of myself like some kind of spirit, but it made me look outwards instead of focusing inwards on all the anxiety that was going on inside of me. And so I think nature for me, I remember that moment so clearly. And another time sitting in the garden with a cup of herbal tea just as the sun was going down and listening to birds singing and, being at the coast, I think is that mindfulness thing. But nature to me is really, really important. So there's that. In terms of a moment in my journey, I don't think there has been. And I don't think there's never been a big aha moment. I think I've just learned. And I think sometimes you don't even realise you're learning, but you look back and you realise, I can look back and think, I haven't been fearful of a panic attack for as long as I can remember, and, things change. I can go and sit in the middle of a row in a theatre now and not have a panic attack. And I don't know when that happened, but it was something that only, say, 3 years ago, I could not do, absolutely could not do. So I think there's just something about taking moments to reflect on what you've learned, because sometimes you just soak things up and learn new skills and techniques, or you have support around you, and you gradually build up these coping mechanisms or these tools, and all of a sudden you realise that, things are a bit better. They are getting better. But it is hard to pinpoint a specific moment, because I just think every day is a new day that we learn or that we experience something. And even if that experience is bad, even if we have one of those lapses and we feel like we've plunged back into the darkness, climbing back out of it is another learning experience, is another way we've coped and managed and pulled ourselves out. So I think, I just feel like every day we learn a little bit more. And I think that's the thing as well, to manage our expectations. Don't expect one thing to change the world for you. Don't expect one big aha moment. Just take every little sort of nugget, every little bit that you learn, every little bit of support and every little step as a big win, because ultimately added together, they will be your big win.
That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Now, I was going to say, what word of hope would you give to anyone experiencing anxiety or mental health illnesses? But I think you've kind of answered it. So instead, I'm going to twist it around to, the people who are currently supporting the people who are struggling, is there a word of hope that you can give them in the context of they are currently feeling like there's nothing else they can give, and they're seeing their friend or their family member or work colleague really struggling? What word of hope can you give to that supporting person?
See, to me, I think that anybody who can balance the, and I think it's quite simple to do, it just maybe sounds a bit backwards, but I think anyone who can balance the acknowledging of how awful and frightened somebody must feel when they're in the middle of an anxiety attack or panic attack with hope is doing so much. I think, it's not about brushing things under the carpet for somebody who's having a panic attack. Acknowledge how frightened they must feel, but reminding them what it is and that they've got through it before, so they'll get through it again. It's just gold. It's the best support you can get. I think if you do try to minimize it or brush it under the carpet, I think that can in some ways make it harder. So I just think anyone who's able to do that for someone, to acknowledge what they're going through, but remind them that they've got through it before, it's giving them hope and strength. And I just think that working together like that, that the person is more likely to come down from a panic attack more quickly or to grasp recovery in a longer term way. So I just think, anyone doing that is just a superstar.
What a great word of encouragement. You are a superstar. What you are doing is brilliant. Lucy, I just want to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to you for your time and for your insight into the journey that you have been through with anxiety and your coping mechanisms, the strategies that you've put in place, but also just that hope is there. It's a constant thing. It's not just one little thing, but it's the constant acknowledgement that you can get over it. You've done it before, you can do it again, and that even if you have that lapse, it's the process of getting out of it again that teaches you more. And I think if we can hold on to the fact that we need to have, I want to say, teachable spirits, we want to constantly learn how we can be moving forward. And for anyone who is experiencing mental health illnesses or anxiety in particular at this time, there is hope for recovery. And recovery isn't diagnosis free. Recovery isn't symptom free. Recovery is about finding those good days and holding on to it like never before. What a great insight into feelings of panic attack. And let's not forget that recovery is possible, and it is completely personal and individual, and it is a journey for all of us. Now, gratitude also helps the heart sing. Now, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mentality Meets, and no matter where you are on your mental health journey, you can find plenty of content and information about our resources at peterlarkham.com, including one of our mental health courses for you or your business. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can find our entire back catalogue of conversations with mental health leaders and experts. If you want to spread the word, drop us a review on the podcast app and share this with your friends. Thanks again for joining us for Mentality Meets, conversations that explore mental health stories and strategies to help leaders like you change the culture of mental health in your workplace.